Hello, you're on the Ruslan Belov channel. Today we'll discuss the situation in Ukraine as of April 12, 2025. A huge number of events have taken place today, so let's get started. Let's begin by moving to the line of contact. We have a lot of interesting updates, so let's go through them step by step. And we'll start with the Sumy section of the front. Today, reports are coming in that Russian units have managed to break through the Ukrainian defenses in the village of Oleshnya. As of today, a large number of pro-Russian cartographers are updating their maps, and at least half of the village of Oleshnya is now under the firm control of Russian forces. The Ukrainian side currently controls only the southwestern and western outskirts of the settlement, but if Russian units have already entrenched themselves within the village, it's likely that the Ukrainian armed forces will be forced to completely withdraw from the area in the near future. Yesterday, according to some cartographers and pro-Russian experts, the Russian army managed to break through Ukrainian defenses and approach the settlement of Hornal. Moreover, a large number of objective control footage has already been published, showing strikes on Ukrainian positions throughout the village, including on crossings that may have been used by the Ukrainian armed forces to support the local garrison. Today, additional map changes or some advances were expected, but by the morning and midday of April 12th, nothing new had appeared. Perhaps something will come up by the end of the day, but we'll cover that in the next report. Next, we move on to the northern Kupiansk section of the front. There are only a few updates here, but they are worth noting. First, Russian units have resumed their offensive in the area of the village of Kamenka. Just last week, we were receiving daily map updates from this area. There were reports of a river crossing over the Oskol River, followed by an expansion of the control zone. At the peak of the offensive, by the end of last week, Russian forces had taken full control of the southern part of the settlement. After that, the offensive came to a halt, even though it was expected that the village would be fully cleared soon. However, today, April 12th, the first new map update appeared confirming further Russian advancement. Of course, this raises the question, what caused the slowdown? Today, some pro-Russian sources report that the Ukrainian Armed Forces 10th Mountain Assault Brigade has been redeployed to the Kamenka direction. Previously, this brigade had been stationed on the Siversk front, near the settlements of Vyemka and Ivano-Darievka. But part of the unit, as we can now see, has been moved toward Kamenka. Possibly this maneuver forced Russian forces to temporarily reduce the pace of their offensive due to increased resistance. In any case, the map updates have resumed. There's a high likelihood that the Ukrainian units from the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade that arrived in the area may have suffered heavy losses. This may have allowed Russian forces to regain momentum. Now, we're moving on to the Chasiv Yar and Toretsk section of the front, also known as the southern Kostianty-Nivka axis. For several days in a row, we've been receiving the largest number of geolocated updates from this direction. So let's go through them step by step, starting with the town of Chasiv Yar. Over the past 24 hours and overnight, reports indicate that Russian armed forces have once again expanded their control zone within the central citadel of Chasiv Yar and taken control of several new buildings. This information was published mainly by neutral cartographers and has not yet been confirmed by geolocated evidence or by the Russian Ministry of Defense. In any case, the maps have been updated, and we can see that the territory under Ukrainian control is gradually shrinking. On the other hand, today we're seeing footage from objective control sources. Russian units from the 98th Division have published videos of drone strikes on Ukrainian strongpoints in the southern part of Chasiv Yar. Let me remind you that these areas were considered to be under Russian control or in the grey zone as of yesterday. Today, however, footage confirms the presence of Ukrainian units at this strongpoint. Based on this footage, a small map adjustment was made. In general, this map update has already been adopted by pro-Russian, neutral and pro-Ukrainian cartographers alike. This means that there was some kind of attack. Perhaps not yesterday, perhaps it took place a few days ago, around the time we discussed the new tactical symbol. In any case, as a result of a new Ukrainian counterattack, they managed to break in and regain control over this strongpoint, which the Russian side is now trying to clear again. The main goal of this offensive, as I see it, is to expand the corridor for evacuating Ukrainian units from the 24th Mechanized Brigade which remains trapped in the central part of the Chasiv Yar citadel. This may be the primary objective. Next, we move to the Toretsk section of the front, from where we continue to receive information about a Russian offensive, a breakthrough, or a special operation in the direction of the settlements of Nelipovka and Pleshevka. Today, the breakthrough has already been confirmed by highly reliable pro-Russian mapping services. According to their data, yes, an attack indeed took place. And yes, as a result of the offensive along the T-0516 highway, Russian units managed to establish a foothold in Nelipovka and also took control of a company-level strongpoint located at the intersection of the roads, at that small junction. This is a fairly significant bridgehead. For now, we're not rushing to mark the territory between Nelipovka and Toretsk as fully under Russian control because it's a very narrow corridor, a bottleneck. There are still many fortified positions in this area. We believe that fighting is still ongoing here, so either the area remains in the fog of war, is contested, or lies in a grey zone. Therefore, we're holding off on coloring in that corridor until we receive additional geolocations. It's also still unclear what's happening with the mine located to the northwest of Toretsk. Apparently, fighting is still taking place in that area. And if we look at the updates from pro-Russian analysts, they also avoid coloring this mine on their maps, likely indicating that Ukrainian forces are still putting up resistance there. Now we move on to the section of the front that is, let's say, the richest in symbols and geolocations. The fire pocket, the cauldron, located south of the Kleban Bike Reservoir. We can see a large number of flag icons, indicating that Russian forces have significantly expanded their control zone over the past 24 hours. Let's compare the maps over time. Just yesterday, the map looked like this. There were already geolocations confirming Russian advances. Today, additional areas are being marked as under control. Overall, the offensive in this section began some time ago. Here's approximately when it started. At that point, there were no updates yet. We talked about Rozovka and Pantelemonovka, which had already come under Russian control. Then there was a regrouping. After that, fresh forces were brought in. And starting from April 8th, the Russian side launched a large-scale offensive. We can see that the Ukrainian forces are offering virtually no resistance. Here is the map as of the evening of April 9th. Russian units enter a strongpoint located south of Kalinov. As of April 10th, Russian forces bypassed the strongpoint and gained control of approximately 50% of Kalinov. The offensive also continues along the H20 highway, with the aim of straightening the front line and flanking the settlement of Valentinivka. Now here's the situation on April 11th. A significant expansion of control, further straightening of the front line, and the clearing of individual strongpoints. By the beginning of April 12th, the situation suggests that Ukrainian defenses have largely collapsed, with at least 70% of Kalinov under Russian control. From the direction of Zelensky Pole, another offensive has reportedly begun toward Hanativka. So overall, we see that the Ukrainian defensive operation is not functioning effectively. This is further confirmed by the pro-Ukrainian mapping service Deep State, which clearly states that the situation in this area is deteriorating daily, with no signs of improvement. This indicates that the offensive will likely continue until Russian forces manage to cut off the salient between the settlements of Tarasivka, Zelensky Pole, Nativka, and Leonidivka. That entire pocket appears to be the primary objective for Russian forces over the next week or two, depending on the pace of the offensive. Meanwhile, the Russian army continues clearing operations in the settlement of Tarasivka, from which a large number of geolocated videos are published daily. We can see that Ukrainian forces are constantly redeploying units to try and stabilize the front line and prevent a breakthrough. But we also see that nothing is working, other than losing equipment. Everything sent to this part of the front is immediately detected by Russian drones and operators, and, of course, destroyed. So we are seeing a very serious push from the Russian side. And combined with the breakthrough near Pleshevka and Nelipovka, the overall picture appears increasingly pessimistic for Ukrainian units defending this part of the front. Now we move on to the Pavlivka section of the front, where the Russian army has also resumed its offensive. Western media are now discussing this daily, pointing out that Russia has set a goal, ahead of possible negotiations and upcoming political dates, to make a push into Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. And we can see that over the past 24 hours, the Russian army has significantly expanded its control zone. This information is mostly coming from neutral and pro-Russian cartographers. According to their reports, Russian forces have entered the eastern part of the settlement of Toretsk, and as of now, about 30 to 40% of the village is under Russian control. So, we can see that only 2 villages remain in this section, Troitske and Horkoho, and beyond them lies the border between the Donetsk region and the Dnipropetrovsk region. The distance to that border is rapidly shrinking. This information is also partially confirmed by pro-Ukrainian mapping services. They too are indicating a shortening of the distance and a Russian advance toward the settlement of Pavlivka. However, the pace of the offensive here is not as rapid or intense as along the H20 highway or some other parts of the front line. Still, combat activity in this area has significantly increased after a long pause. At the same time, the Russian army is gradually tightening the noose around Ukrainian forces along the line of Alexeyevka, Bohatyr and Otradne. Today, reports have come in about the expansion of the Russian-controlled zone from the direction of Rozdolna toward the northwest. The Russian army is aiming to minimize the distance to Otradne and establish fire control over key supply routes. Footage from this area also continues to emerge, showing objective control, including the evacuation of damaged Ukrainian equipment or, in some cases, vehicles that appear untouched by fighting. On the Shevchenkivsky section of the front, reports indicate a continued buildup of Russian forces along the forest belt situated between Volna Pole and Shevchenko. Let me remind you how the map has changed over the last few days. Here's how it looked from April 4th to April 10th. By April 11th, the first geolocations confirmed the presence of Russian troops opposite the settlement of Shevchenko. Today, footage from drones and updated map corrections confirm full control over the entire forest belt and the accumulation of Russian units in a zone approximately 3 kilometers wide. So the buildup along the forest is about 3 kilometers across. From this line, an offensive is expected at any moment, both toward Shevchenko and in the direction of Volny Pole. So in the near future, we may see this part of the map also shift in favor of the Russian Federation. But for now, no offensive has begun, only a buildup of forces. And that's all for today, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and all the best to you.